All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. My name is John Reed. I'm the editor of the PW Perspective. You can find us at www.pwperspective.com. Joining us tonight is our executive officer, Veronica Reed. And, this is something that we've definitely been looking forward to for quite some time now. And over the last few weeks, we have been interviewing with some of the most prominent male leaders here in Prince William County and beyond. And tonight is the ladies' turn, is for the more prominent women. Tonight is forum is called Black Women Lead. And so thank you all again, once again, for those who are joining us on Facebook Live, who are a part of the conversation. We do invite you to send your questions to us. We do have our dedicated staff who is monitoring all the live questions. And so please send them to us so we can make sure they get answered. And so the others will join us momentarily. And so as we get ready to enter now, first off, I would like to introduce one of our first participant is the Vice Mayor of Dumfries, Virginia, the one and only Vice Mayor Monae Nickerson. Vice Mayor, how are you tonight?
I'm well, thank you, John and Veronica. Thank you all for organizing this and thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you. And also joining us from the Board of County Supervisors here in Prince William County, the Woodbridge District Supervisor, Margaret Franklin. Margaret, thank you so much for joining us, Supervisor. How are you tonight?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you. And getting ready to join us momentarily. And coming from Stafford County and representing the Griffis-Widewater District is from County Supervisor Tinesha Allen. Supervisor Allen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so what I'd like to do is once again, just introduce everyone being here tonight. We have Supervisor Margaret Franklin representing the Woodbridge District. We have Vice Mayor Monae Nickerson representing from Dumfries, and from the Griffis-Widewater District, Supervisor Tinesha Allen. And as stated, we sent the question out to everyone. And what's going to happen, our executive officer, Veronica Reed, is going to be asking the questions, and we'll give everyone at least two minutes to answer. And the purpose behind this is just having a conversation. And for those who join us on Facebook Live, we encourage you to send your questions to us. And so we'll make sure to get them answered within the hour. So thank you all once again. What I'd like to do first, before we get started with the questions, is give you all an opportunity, maybe do an introduction for yourselves and talk about just what it means to be a Black woman that leads in our community. Vice Mayor Nickerson, I'll start with you.
So thank you again for having me. Thank you all ladies for being a part of this panel too. I'm sure it's going to be a great conversation. Nice to meet you, Tinesha. We've spoken before, so nice to virtually meet you. So I am, as John said, I am the Vice Mayor of Dumfries. I was elected to my first political term ever. I ran my first race and I won, and that was in July of 2018 that I was appointed, or that I was elected councilwoman and then appointed Vice Mayor by my peers on the council. To be a Black woman who leads it's an honor, but it comes with a lot of pressure. I think that one of the reasons it comes with a lot of pressure, as we were talking in the green room, John, is because as a Black woman, there's a stigma that Black women are strong. And while that may be true, unfortunately, that stigma sometimes pigeonholes us in a way that people don't allow us to be vulnerable, or we can't express vulnerability because then it takes away from the strength that we've been stigmatized to have. And then on the other side of it is that strength, sometimes assertiveness is viewed as aggressiveness. And so there's a difficult balance that we have to walk as Black women, period. And then as a Black woman who leads, the scrutiny is greater. And so it's a challenge, but in the end, I feel it's well worth it for the work that we can get done, and by speaking for and representing, our culture.
Absolutely. Supervisor Franklin, just give a few moments just to introduce yourself and just talk about what it means to be a strong Black woman who leads.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was going back and forth trying to get the lighting correct. I think I may be 80% there.
Okay, that's all right.
My name is Margaret Franklin. I represent the Woodbridge District on the Prince William County Board of Supervisors. First term, been here since January. And I feel like I've been on the board for 6, 7, 8 years. It's been a lifetime with the pandemic, plus everything that we have going on nationally. But this is the time for Black women to lead, in my opinion. This is certainly the time where it is absolutely necessary to stand up and lead, not only just because, you know, we're Black women, but because we offer a voice that oftentimes, even when you look at the patriarchy, you know, just has not been widely accepted in the past. And so now you have more women running for office. You have more Black women running for office. Right here in Prince William County, you have Delegate Foy, who's running to be the, you know, first African-American, you know, female governor. You know, that's incredible. And by the way, we're in 2020. Who, you know, we would have thought that this would have happened a long time before now. And so we absolutely are leading. It's necessary. But I don't think any of us, and I could be wrong, I don't know that any of us ran for office saying, you know, because I'm a Black woman, I must do A, B, and C. I think all of us recognize the service that was lacking in our communities, and that our voice would be different. And that our voice would be an alternative to what we've seen, particularly here in Prince William County. And so it's an incredible opportunity to be here, challenging times, but I see the opportunity in all of it. Finally, we're standing up. Finally, we're able to push programs that people for too long have come up with excuses about why we couldn't do them. So now they're absolutely necessary. And we're all leaders. I mean, Loree is vice chair of the school board. Monae is vice mayor of Dumfries. You know, I'm on the Prince William County Board of Supervisors. We have leaders now that can actually move the ball forward. So I'm very excited to be part of this movement.
Absolutely, thank you. And speaking of which, we transition to the Vice Chairwoman of the Prince William County School Board, representing the Woodbridge District, Ms. Loree Williams. Vice Chairwoman, how are you doing tonight?
I'm okay. I'm a little hot. I'm sorry I joined late. My AC just died, so I was trying to set up. I was trying to set up in my house. I'm about to run in and turn the light on. I got a window unit going, so forgive me for being a little bit late. But yes, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being on. Sorry again for being late. I think this is a fabulous forum. As you can see, like, we elected officials, we just keep the ball moving and make do with what we got, right?
Women,
absolutely. We're dealing with the school board, dealing with air conditioning. Absolutely. I hope everything turns out well for you. Vice Chairwoman.
It's gonna work out.
Absolutely. Let me go to the Supervisor in Stafford, representing Griffis-Widewater District, Supervisor Allen. We turn to you for introduction.
So I am the supervisor for the Griffis-Widewater, which is basically the first half of Stafford, so North Stafford, Northeast Stafford actually. And this is my first term, and I am the first African-American woman elected in Stafford to serve on the Board of Supervisor. And so what does that really mean for pressure and stuff like that? As the Vice Mayor alluded to in her introduction, it does come with an added pressure. I think mine is a little bit even more unique because one, I am the only person of color, regardless of gender, and I'm the only person of my party on the board as well. And so I am held to a much different standard because, you know, I'm not trying to make a comparison to you know, our 44th president, but my actions and my conduct will set the bar for how Black women are going to be viewed in Stafford in leadership positions, because how I react to things and how I make decisions, you know, unfairly or fairly, people are going to say, well, you know, this is how you guys are going to act. So so that added pressure does you know, give me pause at times when I have to do certain things or respond a certain way, because I know I can't really be completely 100% myself. I mean, I'm probably close to it, but most of the times I have to be well measured, which I think at times hamstrung me from truly being able to take certain positions out publicly, just because of the you know, the fear of wrongfully having those that follow in my footsteps be held to whatever standards that I'm completely 100% myself. I mean, oh, I'm sorry, I was there echoing. So in my case, like I was saying, it's a little bit unique that I am the only African American woman in the county and on the board on any county position. I don't have, we do have a school board member, but for the most part, I'm kind of on a solo ship. So there is added pressure to that. But why I ran wasn't as Supervisor Franklin said. I didn't run based on color. I ran based on realizing there was a lack of leadership and a lack of basic caring, because literally that was really the reasons why I ran. And Black women for a long time, we've always had the pulse in our communities and figuring out what is it our communities really need. So I just took the ball and decided to step up, and it's been a very challenging and 6-7 months. Who would have thought I walked into a pandemic, economic recession, civil rights unrest, you know what I mean? So, but I'm grateful I'm here. I believe everything happens for a reason. So, I take everything in stride and I put everything in context, and I just try to go do my job.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you all so much for your wonderful introductions. And again, to those on Facebook Live, we definitely encourage your questions. Our dedicated staff is viewing and monitoring those so we can make sure that we get your questions answered in this time that we have tonight. And so what I'd like to do is we're going to turn over to our executive officer, to Veronica Reed, and she'll ask the question. And then we'll do is just go around the horn.
All right, here's our first question. A lot of people are saying that the demands that are being made for change right now are too extreme. What do you think?
All right, and let me start off with Vice Mayor Nickerson. Can you answer that question?
I'm hearing different demands from different people, but I think when I think about the movement that we're currently in and the demands for equality and justice for all, absolutely not. We shouldn't have to ask for that. So I've not heard anyone say that those demands were too tough or anything like that, unless there are some other demands that I'm not aware of. But for me, what I'm looking for is for legislative change to bring about the equality that we need with regard to legally and justice. We want equality, and like I said, it's a shame that we have to ask for it or demand it. So no, I don't think that they are too tough. We're also looking for equality when it comes to the healthcare system. Why do we have to ask for that? Why do we have to demand it in order to get someone to hear us? I think it's sad that we even have to have these conversations. So no, we are not asking for anything that we should not already have. And the fact that we have to ask is sad in itself.
Absolutely. Let me go to Supervisor Franklin.
Yeah, no, I think that's about right. I mean, what the period that we're in now is that we realize as a people realize the power that we have. And so we're asking for equality, essentially. And that looks, that can be implemented in different ways. We see some of the policy changes that are happening on a federal level, banning chokeholds, qualified immunity, things of that nature. We see some of the changes that's happening on the state level with criminal justice reform. And then even on the local level, where are we putting our dollars? We're putting them towards mental health services. Just had a conversation with Vice Chair Williams today about education funding. So those are the things that, some of those sound like old ideas, but guess what? No one had ever really done that here in Prince William County before. Like, we didn't really care about those issues before. Now you have a new board, you have a school board that recognizes those issues. And so now we can actually put effort towards reforming the system as a whole. And all of that plays into racial discrimination. When you have resources and services that can reach all people, then you can begin to turn down systemic racism. You can begin to change the system when the system is allowed to work for everybody. So I think that's what the basis of the demands that you see today.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of that, Vice Chairwoman Williams, can you expand on that, and especially how that looks like in the school system?
Sure. I think from my perspective, from being a school board member, Supervisor Franklin really started off, really stated my opinion very well. I mean, we have for a long time underfunded schools. We have had tactics that are counter-effective for our Black and Brown students. We have, and it goes everything from dress code to the way that we teach history. A few years ago, I sat on the dais and made a comment about expanding our history lessons for our students and recognizing the achievements of Black and Brown people throughout history, and received feedback that I was trying to change history. And I said, no, I'm not trying to change history. I'm trying to expand the viewpoint, because the people who have written history have been of predominantly one race, and it's their story, and our story has not been included in that. And that affects the mental and social well-being of our Black and Brown students. Even things for picking our school board representative, that's tied usually to our civics and history teacher. The student has to have a relationship with that. And we know for a fact that the students who aren't taught their own history don't have the same self-esteem and don't usually bond with their teachers. So we need this change. It's not a rewrite of the story to exclude. It's a rewrite of the story to be more inclusive and to tell the whole truth. You have to have a 360 perspective. Having a limited perspective shapes everything that we do as adults moving forward. I think that's, a good reason why I hear from a lot of my non-people of color friends that they had no idea that people of color were going through this. They were unaware. They thought that, racism had reached historic lows and people were treated equitably. And we see now, because this is not taught in an equitable fashion, that has been a persistent a persistent rhetoric in our communities, that racism is gone and everybody's treated equally. And Black and Brown people, we know that that's not true. So I think this is a major ordeal, and I think now is the time to really correct these wrongs from federal all the way down to our local levels.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Supervisor Allen.
So when I think of words, when people say things like, when it deals with systemic changes and extreme and going too far, I always try to figure out who the source is, right? So whenever those words are being used, it's always the person or the group that's in power, right? Because they don't want to engage in equal sharing of that power. So you have to figure out who the messaging is from. Obviously, if you have spent 250 plus years building a system of inequality, of course, you're never going to see what the other side sees. And so when you are asked to share that power and to check whatever privilege you have, you're not going to want to, right? So you're going to use, inflammatory words that can create a narrative for you to then deny those very marginalized groups the opportunity to get the equality that they deem necessary. So you try to deflect and you try to red herring the message and you try to do whatever you can, because if you are not focusing on the principal issue and you're focusing on semantics like words, you are no longer focusing on core issues of how to fight systemic racism. So of course it's not extreme, but with anything that's had so many years to entrench itself, usually you have to think about, what are the ideas that people are throwing out there? So right now, people are throwing out everything possible that they can think of, but that does not necessarily mean that within that spectrum, that's what's going to be the final outcome. So, so certain things that people might say, it doesn't mean that, that's what's going to happen. But by saying, those words, it's going to get certain people riled up, and it's going to be, in the efforts of derailing the process. But when you think of now, I mean, of course it's not extreme. Like I said, 250 years, like that's extreme, okay? That's extreme of oppressing a group of people for no other reason than the color of their skin. And so right now, I think what the pandemic did has highlighted the inequalities, as Vice Mayor and Vice Chairman and Supervisor Franklin have all said. It's highlighted the inequalities that have long existed, right? And so for a lot of people, I know for us at Stafford, one of the things that I've been focusing on is giving the community an outlet to be able to relay those instances of discrimination. But the fact that we've had to come there, it's because for so long, it was just us saying it. But now that the pandemic and social media and being home, and we're able to see these actual images and hear stories and seeing repetitive stuff on our screens, people are like having a clutching pearl moment, like, oh my God, this existed. And so, you know, for us also as a community, we've never had the opportunity to feel safe to say something without retaliatory measures. So because this pandemic has allowed us that space to air our grievances, rightfully so, for some people, that's uncomfortable because they're like, wait a minute, as the vice chairman had said, wait a minute, I thought this didn't exist. Obama got elected, and you know, we have all these Black people here, there, or all these brown people. You know, I wouldn't think it was such an issue, but now that it's all out in the open, a lot of people are like, you know what, I'm going to speak up. I'm going to tell my story about how the system has impacted me. And so when you have all this amalgamation of all these different factors, like I said, you're going to have actors that are going to say, you know, let's throw words out there so that we can derail the process of real progress. So of course, it's not extreme at all. It's
Right.
long. It's been long overdue.
Absolutely.
All right. Next question. With this reinvigorated wave of Black Lives Matter and civil rights, how do you plan to use your platform to implement new legislation or policies?
All right, Vice Mayor Nickerson, let's go back on you.
Okay, so in Dumfries, on the council, we, myself and other council members, have started to do small things in Dumfries. For instance, we have removed Columbus Day as a holiday and instead renamed it Indigenous People Day. We took away Lee Jackson holiday off the calendar totally, and instead went about by giving the town staff Election Day as a holiday. And those little moves, to me, you know, at the local level, it's easier to make those small legislative moves. But what it shows is it's showing our community that we are trying to be inclusive, that we recognize the importance of voting, because with voting not being a holiday, even to this day, it's not a holiday, you know, across the United States. And it very well should be, because no matter how long the voting polls are open, if I have to go to work that day, it poses a barrier to me getting to the polls. And so what we know is that when you look at the accessibility to get out and vote, something as small as that being a work day could get in the way. And when you think about who that would be most impactful to, it's going to be our lower wage workers. And so little things like that. The other thing that I try to do is to be accessible, not only to my constituents, but to those in the surrounding communities. And I like to be available and accessible and open for conversation. A few weeks ago, I hosted a demonstration of solidarity in Dumfries. And at that demonstration, I recognized all of the political officials that were in attendance. And then I engaged the audience and empowered them to go speak to these people. These are your elected officials, because, you know, the message that I tried to relay was, we want you to go to the polls, but we want you to make educated decisions. And so here is your opportunity to go and talk to these people. Come talk to me, because what you may find is that I'm worth your vote, or I may not be, but you can't hold me as an elected official accountable for everything that happens to you if you don't let me know what's important to you. And so that just kind of takes me to my motto of don't just complain, contribute. So it's important that we are accessible and that people are engaging, and we have to engage. For far too long in my community, very specifically, there's been a lack of engagement with regard to the residents and constituents. And so this new council that I came in with, we actually went out and we knocked on every single door in the community, not just the ones that we knew were voters, but the ones that we could see had not voted in a while. And we challenged them, come out and vote, and let's talk about it and get engaged and understand the power of your engagement and the power of your vote.
Absolutely. Thank you. Supervisor Franklin.
Yeah, and actually, but before I answer the question, I just want to say I was at the demonstration that Vice Mayor Nickerson put together, and it was a wonderful event. What I've noticed, though, with us being a lot more vocal about these issues of racial justice, is that people that disagree with us are using events like that and events like or situations where we speak out against you know, injustices. They're using those as opportunities to paint us as radical, to paint us as wanting to completely dismantle everything. And what's interesting to me is, you know, if they really took the time to understand why certain people feel the way they do, they would understand that you have to go back hundreds of years, as we've been talking. You know, when we go to a demonstration like what, Vice Mayor Nickerson put together, you understand that there were students there. And I remember when she got on the microphone and asked people to go talk to your elected officials, and she was specifically talking to those students too, and telling them, go, you saw the electeds raise their hand, go ask them what they've done lately or what they are planning to do. But all people want to see is Black Lives Matter. Oh, that's a threat to us. And it's really sad. And it's just something that I've been noticing over the past month or so. People that disagree with us, they're trying to paint us as these super radical people when all we're asking for is a fair shot. So that's just something that I wanted to note. But to answer your question, again, I think that what we've seen over the past month has actually presented an opportunity for us. I mean, you know, I had what I ran on during the campaign, you know, housing, transportation, education, all this stuff. But I don't think I expected to do any of that in the first 6 months, right? But because the need became so great, you know, we were able to launch a housing assistance program from COVID. You know, we were able to put more money towards social services, as I mentioned earlier, because people need it today. It's not a situation that, you know, you can plan for. The pandemic is happening now. And while the pandemic is happening, what that has also highlighted is the fact that it placed a greater focus on disparities within our communities that we always knew existed. But now that no one's working, you know, we really see where the hardest hit area is. You know, I'm not sure if 22193 or 22191 is in any of the Dumfries parts, but it's in my district, and we have some of the highest COVID rates. I think at one point the highest COVID rates in the state. That's a problem, right? And so, you know, we're scrambling to get resources down here because none of us could have prepared for a pandemic. So what we've been able to do is really use our platform to put together new programs to actually help people. We've actually used our platform to just talk about the issues, period, and to say you have a board that is not afraid, or you have a new majority that's not afraid to talk about issues of race and to call it out when we see it. And we're not going to be bothered by people that threaten us either, because we've noticed that also over the past month. You know, people want to lodge all types of attacks against us, and we won't be moved. We're going to continue to talk about these issues and why it's important to break down the systems that have been working against us for so long.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. We go to Vice Chairwoman Williams.
Thank you. For me, it's a matter of continuing to ride the wave. I think I'm the longest tenured elected official on this call. So for me, it started really when I got on the board, fighting that fight with things like recognizing that we need to revamp the code of behavior, because our Black and Brown students often are misunderstood and end up becoming disciplinary problems. That's been a continuous work in progress, and I still work on to this very day, making sure that the dress code is equitable. You know, a lot of my constituents are lower income, not all of them, but for example, Fred Lynn, when they removed the uniforms, I had a lot of parents and constituents that all they could afford were leggings for their students. And, you know, curvy girls, historically, more on the Black and Brown side, getting in trouble, having to get sent home because their leggings were deemed inappropriate, but someone who had a different figure was fine. So fighting things like that, that went all the way to was legislated at the state with Jennifer Carroll Foy, Delegate Foy, taking up that issue. Things like being integral to changing names of schools, which is important, being the voice on the dais that said, look, I know what it's like to go to a school and not know who your school is named after, or not take pride in your school because of the name that's on the building. I mean, that matters. Students pay attention to that. Adults constantly get in the way of our young people and think that we always know better, or that we see everything that they see, and we don't. For me, it was also adding a student representative to the board. Now we have 3. Petitioned really hard for that, so that we've had students of color in that position. Now, as of this past school year, we have a student senate where every there's a representative on that from every high school. Eventually we'll go down to all the way to elementary school level. Working with the last board to revamp the non-discrimination policy to be more inclusive for everybody. That's important, especially for our LGBTQ members of our Black and Brown communities, because we know the suicide rate is high for them. Our staff that are Black and Brown and members of that community, that's really important to their well-being and mental health, and basically feeling safe and secure in a school environment. Now, re-looking at the SRO agreement, that's on my list of things to do. We've had a revamp of our SRO program. We have fantastic SROs, but we also have some that really don't know how to deal with our Black and Brown students. And that's really important, because we want to shut down, or I want to shut down as much as possible, that school to prison pipeline. Prince William County is not high on that list, but why should we, be on that list if we can avoid being on that list? That's how I feel. And also diversifying our staff is on our list. I know that the division works really hard with that, but I was instrumental in pushing for making sure we go out to HBCUs and hire a staff, pushing us further along. We're the last ones out the gate from our surrounding counties to have hiring fairs. So that makes a difference. If you're not out there first, you're not going to get the best of the best. You're not going to have the pool to pick from to have a diverse staff. And that's important. We are a minority majority, forgive me, but I hate that term. We are a minority majority county, and that is what our student makeup is. Our administrative staff should absolutely reflect that. Our counselors, right now I'm pushing for mandatory trauma training for all of our staff coming in for the school year. It's completely unacceptable to me that that's an optional training. I have no idea why it's optional. Our children are dealing with the trauma of a pandemic. On top of that, our Black and Brown children are dealing with the trauma of seeing on the news Black Lives Matter, hearing it, they're just daily life experience, that the things that they have to talk to with their parents that don't occur in other households, and then going into a staff that is mostly Caucasian and can't identify with that, unacceptable. We have to have that mandated for all of our staff so that they can understand the students' needs and services. And I will continue to fight that fight for our students, because they're our future. And if they're not well prepared to come out in society, what are we really doing?
Absolutely. Supervisor Allen.
So as I alluded to earlier, I'm in a unique position in that I don't have any other party affiliation on the board. So for me, it's a matter of having to strike a difficult balance between trying to find issues that are very valid to take up legislation and do work, but also making sure that I take it up in the sense that I will have the other votes I need, because I don't want to just try to do everything and then not being able to do anything, right? So I have to be strategic in picking in what I can do. So my central focus has been on trying to establish a hybrid, which if it's done, it would actually be a hybrid Human Rights Commission civilian overview in that it would have the human rights aspect of investigating discrimination in any facet, gender, race, disability, you name it. And then also have the civilian overview site where the board will be able to come back to the supervisors and give policy recommendations so that we can start executing ordinances to address some of those issues, because oftentimes, human rights commissions don't really have that that component to their makeup. And so I want to make sure that if we're not, having the outcomes in terms of disciplinary actions on the human rights side, at least we can have procedural corrections to fix certain behaviors that may not technically break the law, but are definitely faux pas in the community and definitely clear examples of discrimination. One of the other things that I'm trying to do also is I've been working with my planning commissioner. He's been spearheading this, and we've been on the same page of trying to figure out how to rework our comprehensive plan and how we zone and how we attract investment and attract developing, because oftentimes, as we know, our communities are often left bare when it comes to investment, whether it's transportation, commercial, real estate, and oftentimes it's very intentional, and because you know, government officials will dictate how they want development to do and whatnot. So we have commissioned the so we're in the process of getting our planning commission to start looking at ways that we can foster more equality and not have targeted development in certain areas that are affluent, so that there's a better distribution of at least land wealth, in our opinion, right? Because in this country, I mean, land wealth is the holy grail. So if we have people's land that can be more valuable, then that's one way of economic empowerment, excuse me. So we're in the process of beginning that. When we return from our summer break, our planning commission and our boards will start to look at that. And then what are the other things that I was wondering? Oh, fixing our infrastructure. Because oftentimes, once again, infrastructure, especially in 2020, is very, very key to economic empowerment, because a lot of jobs, especially this pandemic has highlighted, is very dependent on access to broadband and access to certain telecommunications capabilities. And in Stafford, in certain parts, you know, it's concentrated in certain neighborhoods, regardless of your affluence, but it's also you know, not very well established and developed. So being able to expand that to a lot of neighborhoods that where all of Stafford has that, we can allow people not, you know, especially of low income, not to just focus on, you know, working the retail job, but the ability to, you know, maybe go to school part-time online if you can't physically drive, right? Like that's another option to attain a higher education, and then maybe get jobs that, you know, utilize your computer skills. So those are some things that I'm focusing on. But, you know, as I said, being the only person, I have to walk a very, very thin line, and you know, and I'm very envious of my counterparts up north, because I don't have staff. I am my staff, right? So I have to do all I have to do all of this. I mean, we have county staff, but when I say staff, I meant like my staff to do the work to help me. So I have to be able to juggle all of this and make sure that what I'm presenting to my colleagues are things that are substantial, so that, you know, if there's a denial, it's a denial just because they don't believe in it, but not denial in substance. But those are just some things that I'm trying to do to help bridge the gap.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And before we go to the next question, I want to thank all of our viewers who have been sending us questions during tonight's forum. And want to read a question and just kind of go around home and try to kind of get on a more personal level. You know, we know historically that Black women were the backbone of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And so today, as elected officials who happen to be Black women, how do you find your role in regards, or how do you see your role in regards to comparison to those leaders in the 1960s as you're leading the movement today? Supervisor Franklin, let me go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously a lot of similarities in terms of the 60s and kind of where we are now. The biggest difference is from a governing standpoint, we have more power because there are more people of color, you know, particularly Black people at all levels of government. And so I do see that as the main difference. But I think this just kind of ties into your last question. You know, it allows us to speak up on a greater level. And it allows us to put forward measures that we think is important. In Prince William County, we're working on an effort now to create a racial justice commission to really talk about these issues from a granular standpoint. And I would really like for this commission to provide recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, you know, to hear directly from the community and not just we come up with ideas and listen to ourselves, right? Like it'll be nice to listen to the community. So that's one of the things that we're doing. And then also, some of these things I forgot, but we're looking to change the name of Jefferson Davis Highway, which when you think about that, to be honest, that's very superficial. Right? Like that's not going to change the racial issues that we have in this county. But for me, it's a small step to say that we're listening and we care. And this is just the start hopefully decades worth of, again, dismantling the system. But, you know, we learned from the 60s, I think, right? I was just watching the documentary on John Lewis a couple of days ago. And, you know, it was someone speaking about when he was a teenager, he was involved in SNCC. And, you know, they were saying, well, you know, why don't we do A, B, and C? And he was like, yeah, we can do all that, but we're still going to march. And he was saying, you know, the other person said, well, you know, we can also do whatever. And he said, okay, but we're still going to march. And, you know, I think the civil rights movement was so important in really teaching us not only how to stand up for what we believe, but to be consistent in it. Right? Like, you know, like to be consistent and be comfortable with what we believe, despite all of the opposition. So the civil rights movement was incredible, but we're in a time now where we really have to take back and move forward with the gains that they helped create. Because I'm sure with all the work that John Lewis had done in the 60s, I'm sure his heart is heavy looking at where we are today, you know, because he helped get us the right to vote. But, you know, we're still dying at alarming rates with regards to police violence, with regards to violence, period, with regards to healthcare issues, you know, like we're literally losing our lives because of how the institutions were set up. So I think even he understands that even the foundation they put in place, we still have such a long way to go. But I think it was Tinesha that mentioned this. We've been at home during the pandemic, so everyone has had the opportunity to watch TV and see the disparities for themselves. And I think that's why we see such a difference.
Absolutely. Thank you. Vice Mayor Nickerson, how do you see your role as Vice Mayor Dumfries?
So there were a lot of great women that led and had movements in the 60s. I think, you know, one of the major differences now is that we're leading from the front. And what I mean by that is now you see more Black women in political positions and leadership roles. So that gives us an avenue to lead, I think, maybe even a little more effectively, because now we're on a higher platform in which we can reach a broader audience. So the sad part is that, you know, like Supervisor Franklin said, the sad part is that there's been regression, and it's a shame that we're here still. I don't even know if I want to say again, rather than still. I think we're still here because even though the movement is louder now, I think COVID-19 is what has helped to amplify the movement. Because honestly speaking, if I just take myself, for example, the demonstration that I did it on a Friday because it's COVID-19, I didn't have to be at work. And if I had to be at work, I may not have had the opportunity to put it together. So COVID-19 has absolutely amplified the movement, but I think we're in a better place now because we are in positions now where we're able to take, you know, and make legislative changes. And we're in positions now where we can reach a broader platform. So, you know, thank goodness for the leaders that we've had in the 60s. And while it's a shame that we're still here, I think we are in a better place to impact more change.
Absolutely. Thank you. Vice Chairwoman Williams.
Thank you. Let me first start out and let Tinesha know she is not alone with no staff, because that is us over here on the school board. And I agree wholeheartedly. When you propose something, it's all you. But yeah, I mean, I think when I think of the Black women leaders of the 60s, I really feel like they provided a firm foundation for us to stand on and add an next block. We're and just like Supervisor Franklin said and Vice Mayor Nickerson said, I mean, we're in a different time, and we're still fighting those same fights, but from a different position more than ever now. When I go to conferences and I go to special events, I'm seeing more and more Black women in positions of authority leading, and we're the cornerstone most often for family. So by keeping that alive, if nothing else, we're encouraging the next generation. But even more so in this time, we are writing those policies. We are writing that legislation. We are advocating from all sides. I mean, just this call alone, look, we've got school board, we've got vice mayors, we've got supervisors, we've got board members, and we're a physical, real representative to the next generation who sees us, and not only sees one type of Black woman, but we're all, each one of us on this call looks different. We speak differently, we dress differently. And that's, you know, when I was coming up, I was I'm a Black woman, I'm also multi-ethnic. You know, I didn't have a place. Now I feel like I have a place, I have a voice, I have an identity. And so for me, you know, I feel like I'm leading the way for other women who consider that, other young girls who are like, I'm a Black woman, but I'm also this, and this. And this is just another perspective to that conversation, that I think it's broadening the definition of what a Black woman is. It's broadening the conversation of what our needs are and making it more inclusive. And we're just, I mean, I think it's a fantastic thing, but I think we're just taking it, like the two women before me said, to the next level, and continuing to build on that foundation and standing firm, like Black women have been doing for centuries.
Absolutely. We go to Supervisor Allen.
So I'm not going to, you know, say much because it's been said before, brilliantly by my my counterparts on this Zoom conference. But like in my perspective, you know, I think I'm one of those. If I had to find an equivalence to my place to the civil rights, to the Black women, I would say I'm those Black women who were the brains behind the operations where you rarely ever saw them. I think if I didn't have a position on the board, you wouldn't know what I was doing. You know, I'm comfortable working behind the scenes. Because I just know I don't want my skin color to be politicized, and take away from the moment. I try to make sure that, like the other Black women in the past, I do a lot of the work behind the scenes so that, you know, there's no opportunity for people to weaponize my skin color against what I'm trying to get done. So I do a lot of it behind the scenes, and I'm okay with that, right? Like I didn't get into this for credit or get into this for anything bigger. So you know, that's the similarities that I see, because, you know, there's countless of women that did a lot of the work that never got recognition. And like I said, I would be one if I wasn't a supervisor. But even as a supervisor, I stay very, very far away from, you know, the opportunities when I'm asked to do certain things, not because I don't want to. I get asked by the newspapers to do stories about, you know, civil rights and Stafford, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing that because I don't want to take away from the messaging. I don't want people to weaponize whatever I say or do, because when my work is done, when I get the legislation to help fix and correct the problems, then I can have that opportunity to talk. But I don't want anything to take away from that, because I feel if I let my you know, I don't even know what to call it, but if I ever made that mistake of trying to be the face of anything in this moment or do anything, and then something doesn't get done, I'm going to always question myself. Was I my biggest obstacle? Because I know what my room is, right? Like I know what my community is, and so being able to read that community and navigate that is to me is more important than putting a face to it, so that the work can get done. When the work is get done, we can have all day. I'll take all the questions whatsoever, but if the work is not done, then I'm going to feel like I failed on some level. So yeah, so in that aspect, that, you know, that's where I identify.
Awesome question. Thank you.
All right, next question.
Vice Mayor Nickerson, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to go back to what Tinesha said, because I think what she said was very on point. And that is, but since we're talking about women who lead, I think that the point that Tinesha made about wanting to stay in the background so that the color of her skin doesn't overtake the moment or is weaponized against her or whatever it is that she's trying to do, I feel like that is a struggle unique to Black women. And it's a shame, but in 2020, that is still a struggle that is unique to us, because others don't have to think about, even Black men for that matter, because, you know, men are regarded absolutely differently than women are, you know. And so as a Black woman, you know, to say that I want to get the work done in the background because I don't want anybody to focus too much on, hey, it's a woman, it's a Black woman, and take away from the moment that I'm trying to escalate. And it's too bad that we still have to deal with that. But I absolutely think that that is unique to Black women who lead. And so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just, as she was saying, it was just resounding with me, like, you know, that was a very good point.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Veronica.
All right. How do you inspire young Black women who are either participating in this movement or are afraid to participate?
Vice Chairwoman Williams, let's go to you first.
Well, I'm constantly talking to young Black women, as many as I come across, wherever I come across them. Anybody, I think maybe, because I know what it feels like to be one and not always look like the stereotypical image of one. So for me, it's just a matter of making sure that their voice can be heard, they feel comfortable being heard, and just constantly reminding when I come across young Black women that I'm here, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to help lift you if that's your desire, but really just to support you in whatever you feel comfortable doing, and then constantly reminding them of the history that has come before, so that letting them know that they're not alone, this struggle is not unique to them, and there are plenty of other great women that have come before them, for them to look up to if necessary.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Supervisor Franklin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, a lot more young women, young Black women are looking to run for office. And I think that's great. I think a couple of years ago, we were still in the phase of encouraging women to run, myself included. I think Loree knows a lot about that because she was one of the ones pushing me. But now what I've noticed is young Black women particularly are a lot more aggressive in just taking the first step on their own, because they see kind of what's going on, not only nationally, but in their communities. And it's really interesting because sometimes I do get emails from people that I've never met, from women looking to run for office. What did you have to do? What's this all about? And so I find myself more and more today not having to really do the pushing, because people are fired up. Like, you know, Black women are fired up about running. I mean, we just talked about Delegate Floyd, who's running for governor. No one had to convince her to do that. You know, she saw the need for it. I have a friend who is running for Congress in Ohio, in a Republican district, a very tough district, but I can tell you, no one had to tell her to run. You know, her experience is what pushed her to do that. For me, you know, I was weighing a lot of things in terms of, and a lot of women struggle with this too, you know, should I do it? Should I wait? Is it my time? You know, all of these questions. But again, what I've noticed now with young Black women is you don't, that push is not necessary right now. Like, they are just diving in and taking the opportunity. And I think that's beautiful. And that's why I say, I think the moment that we're in now has really created a lot of opportunities that perhaps, you know, we would have kind of been trudging along had it not happened.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Supervisor Allen.
I haven't had many young Black women reached out to me in the capacity of running, but I have had a lot of them reached out to me in the capacity of just getting involved in government in some fashion, whether it's joining a committee or asking me. I've gotten a lot of questions on more about the engagement side of it, them wanting to become more engaged and wanting to learn more about the functions of government, what it is that you know, the local government does, what the supervisors do, you know, all those machinations, so that eventually I think that education process may hopefully be fruitful and lead to someone eventually. Because for us, we have elections, we have 4 board seats up next year. So so maybe next year, maybe, you know, I have spent a great deal of time educating people on that. I've talking to a lot of people, because I would say the beauty of it, of me being able to do that, is because I'm very not known in my community, because I literally dress and you know, and march to my own beat, so I can walk outside and no one will know I'm the county supervisor. And so that has actually allowed me to have very frank and honest conversation with a lot of young people. And my sister is 19, and so I talk to a lot of her friends, and she serves as a mouthpiece for a lot of the Fredericksburg, Stafford area too, from what I tell her. So I educate her, and it's kind of a ripple effect, and she does it as well. I also go and I talk to people. If someone asks me, I will go and sit and talk. So I do a lot of the educational side of the involvement, and hoping that eventually next year, or whether 2 or 3 years from now, it will bear fruit, and lead from that, and have some young Black women step up. But as of right now, no one has come to the table and actually said they want to run. They have said they just want to be involved in government first and see what the process is like.
Absolutely. Vice Mayor Nickerson.
To young women who are already interested, I would tell them to follow their heart and their mind, and find ways to get involved. And then I would offer an opportunity for ways to be involved. For those who think they're interested but don't necessarily have the I don't know if I want to call it fortitude, but maybe don't necessarily feel like there's a place for them, or they're afraid or nervous about getting involved, I would say start small, because every little bit helps. And for those young ladies, I would say, talk to people like me, talk to other elected officials, talk to, other, because there are plenty of Black women to choose from now. So, get involved with community service, get involved with the schools, and start, influencing those that are younger than you. There are so many ways to get involved, and everybody doesn't always want to be at the forefront. And so I would encourage them that you can get involved without being in the forefront, and just, maybe offer some different options for ways that they can be involved, if not, in the very beginning or in the very front as a leader. And for those who want to be leaders, I'm happy to share the microphone with them and say, hey, get up here, let's do this. Let's talk about ways we can, get you involved and also engage your peers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And again, thank you all so much for the questions you've been submitting to us on Facebook Live as well. So just a couple more questions in the time we have for the forum. Thank you. Ronnie?
How can we begin to change the cultural stigmas and inequalities surrounding race? What additional changes do you hope to see in the near future?
Supervisor Franklin, let's go to you first, please.
Yeah, I think just continuing to hit on the systemic issues, and it has to all happen at each level of government. We've already seen, Congress take the first step, at least on the House side, towards police reform. Seeing that go a step further. I think on the state level, again, we have to make sure that we're budgeting for education, that we're budgeting adequately for housing needs. And I think that has to go on the local level as well. And so really for me, I'm looking at all of this from a governing standpoint, because that's the position I'm in. How can we continue to work to, kind of peel back those systemic issues? And I think that starts a lot with your budget process. I mean, where are you putting your dollars? And so for me, I feel like that's the most important thing to focus on, the governing part. If you're in that position, if you're an activist, I imagine, that the best way to be effective is to continue to be loud about whatever the issue is, right? And continue to, as Mr. Lewis said, get into good trouble, right? And letting us know as government officials that it's not going away. I think what's also good about having Black people in elected positions is the fact that you don't have to convince us as much that these are real issues, right? Because we already understand that, understand what those issues are. And a lot of times, we're prepared to fight for those issues. And some of us have more resources than the others. I mean, Tinesha just mentioned she's in a very difficult position down in Stafford, right? And so you have to also understand the realities of governing. What we're able to do in Prince William County is a little bit different, but I can tell you the culture of Prince William County is still very much the same. and that we're slowly trying to peel back the mindsets as well. So I've learned a lot in the past 6 months, but what I want to see is just continuing to peel back the systemic issues that we see, and we can actually do it because we're the ones in power now. It's not easy, but we can actually do it.
Absolutely. Vice Chairwoman Williams.
Thank you. I think for me, it's continuing to push on those major things like our code of behavior, our MOU agreement with SROs, you know, making sure that we have the training, professional development in place to create the culture so that it is inclusive and so that everybody understands what that means, and not a check the box, professional development, but real concrete, sustainable training with accountability factors put in. You can take a lot of training and you can learn all you want, but if there's no accountability, it's almost doesn't make a difference. So for me, the accountability is really important. And just like Supervisor Franklin said too, for me, it's lobbying to the state, federal, and our local officials to fully fund education. Lobbying to our state officials to make it a mandate from the state down that we change our curriculum to be inclusive, and that, you know, we don't, for me, not giving up on the fight until those things happen, and on a permanent basis.
Right, absolutely. Vice Mayor Nickerson, let me go to you.
Please repeat the question, because when you first asked it, my mind went somewhere. And then as I listened to the other ladies' answers, I'm wondering, wait, did I miss the question? Would you mind repeating it, please?
Oh, not at all.
Thank you.
All right. How can we begin to change the cultural stigmas and inequalities surrounding race? What additional changes do you hope to see in the near future?
Okay, thank you. With regard to changing the cultural stigmas surrounding race, I think that one of the things that we have to do is we have to have difficult conversations about what those stigmas are, where they originated, and how I am not that stigma. I think also we need to tap into our allies, hold them accountable, have difficult conversations with them, and also hold them accountable, because I think it's the stigmas that the systemic racism is built on. So in order to start to, you know, we want to peel back those layers like Supervisor Franklin and Vice Chair Williams said. We want to peel back those layers and we want to do things legislatively. But the reality of it is as long as we have those stigmas that are being held over our head, it will continue to be a challenge. So we have to make sure that we're having conversations and doing our part with regard to those conversations, that though they are difficult, just making sure that we can challenge these stigmas and hold people accountable to being our allies, and knowing that just because you hashtag Black Lives Matter doesn't make you an ally. You know, talk about what being an ally is, and then challenge those folks with, you know, this is what being an ally looks like. And for all that we can do in our positions, the reality of it is our reach is unfortunately limited. And so in order for our reach to be more impactful, we need great support, and that support comes from outside of our own circles. And so we have to break down those stigmas, and we have to build support within the circles around us in order to have a more impactful reach. What I would like to see in the near future is for the things to continue to change, because legislation is changing. If we were, for instance, to be able to get Jennifer Carroll Foy elected, she will break all sorts of barriers by being the first Black woman in that position in Virginia. And I think that she will then chip away at a glass ceiling that's been in place for so long, because you look at the fact that, you know, we had a Black woman running for president. You know, she was vying for the presidency at one point. And I feel like there are stigmas that got in the way of her chances, and which is why she, you know, is no longer a contender. There may have been some things that, you know, not everybody agree with, but the point is that she was there but now she's not anymore. So I think that stigmas are still holding us back, and we just have to challenge people on those stigmas and start talking about them out loud and try to understand where they're coming from and break them down that way. And so hopefully I will see in the immediate future this movement continue. I don't want it to lose momentum because I feel like we are getting things done slowly but surely.
Absolutely. Supervisor Allen.
So pretty much what everyone else said, it's you know, it's what, especially what the vice mayor just said is where I'm at on the personal level. We've got to have a safe space for more uncomfortable conversations. Because if we create a safe space, meaning one where people feel free to exchange ideas, then we can start bridging the gap and figuring out what, you know, where we can correct some of the behaviors. Because, you know, oftentimes some of the misnomers and the, you know, discriminatory behavior is often learned. So if we have a safe space where our counterparts can ask us questions and vice versa without, you know, judgment and whatnot, then we can start breaking down some of those barriers. So I know, you know, you know, what the vice mayor has done and giving people a forum, what we've done, what some of our activists at Stafford have done in creating meetings for people to be able to share openly and ask questions where they might not have been able to you know the answers to certain stereotypes without being judged. You know, I think having spaces for uncomfortable conversations need to continue. And then we just also overall just honestly, and it can only be achieved through legislation, is make it uncomfortable to be a bigot and a racist. Because if you don't make it uncomfortable, what reasons would I have to change my behavior, right? There has to be some type of retribution. And I'm not saying retribution in the sense that someone else might take it wrong. I meant like you have to have consequences. Maybe that's the better word. You have to have consequences for your action. And unless bigots and racists don't have consequences, they will keep finding new ways to keep pushing the boundaries. It's like with your child. If you have a kid and you don't discipline their behavior, whatever method you choose, that child is always going to keep pushing the envelope until they can no longer get away with it. And obviously, if you've given them so much latitude, at this point, how can you even pull that rope back? And you might not even know what the rope is. So until we make it so hard for them to crawl under a rock, then it's never going to change. So we have to be able to use legislation and use the powers that we have, and not just as elected leaders, but as just as regular citizens, and demand change so that we can have an uncomfortable environment. That's when we're going to start being able to see real lasting change. And we cannot, as the vice mayor said, settle for the bare minimum and have this movement die out, because they're hoping this happens, right? Because they've had multiple chances of this, multiple instances of this happening since the civil rights movement, and nothing, and in their mind, they feel if they can give us low hanging fruit, or they can throw us, you know, little treats and we'll go away, then they can continue perpetuating their system. So we have to make sure that we keep our foot on the neck of injustice, because if we do, then we'll know, and we'll be telling every elected official that at no point is your job safe. At no point will you ever be able to say, you know what, I don't have to think about racism, it doesn't exist. No, every day that you're in your seat, you need to think about how are you contributing to a more just and equal society? Because until you do that, until we truly have one, then all men are not created equal, and we will continue to perpetuate this system.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all those answers, and for all of you who submitted your questions via Facebook Live. We want to thank you all so much for this wonderful evening tonight, the conversation, and we will continue to keep it going. And that's the most important thing. And for all of you who have just stood up for us as elected officials and what you all have done, we sincerely thank you for what you're doing, for your courage, for being able to be a voice for us in the community. So thank you all so much. Vice Mayor Nickerson, Supervisor Franklin, Vice Chairwoman Williams, and Supervisor Allen. Thank you all so much for our Executive Administrator, Veronica Reed. This is John Reed from the PW Perspective. Just encouraging you to go out and be a voice in the community. So thank you all once again for those on Facebook Live. You all have a wonderful Friday evening and enjoy your weekend. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
ladies.
Bye. Thank you.